caused chaos on election day that he speculated the National Guard might say they're evil. What they've done, they've weaponized our elections. They've done things that nobody thought was even possible. Well, the vice president will take questions from Brett Baird in a session to be broadcast tonight at 6 p.m. EST. Many of you may have already watched it. She's joining a long line of Democratic candidates and elected officials who have ventured into hostile television territory. And the longest living president in American history has voted again. Jimmy Carter, who turned 100 on October 1st and has been in hospice care since February of last year, submitted his absentee ballot today. Now, that's according to his grandson, Jason Carter. Jason Carter is the chairman of the Carter Center. He said in a text message today that his grandfather's ballot had been deposited at a drop box at a courthouse in Georgia. Carter, the Georgia native, returned a completed absentee ballot as one of the longest living, again, presidents in the U.S. history. And today, Republicans who have denied the 2020 election results or refused to commit to accepting the outcome of the 2024 election and who have more extreme views on social issues are running in critical congressional races throughout the country. They are poised to replace the mainstream conservatives who once formed the spine of the GOP in Congress and who have either left or been purged by a party that regards them as insufficiently hardline or insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump. Well, Donald Trump is at it again. That is, he's lying yet again. He declared himself the father of IFV, in vitro fertilization. Now, he did this in a town hall event yesterday focused on women's issue. And as you can imagine, it raised many eyebrows. And Kamala Harris slammed him for, again, taking credit for something he has absolutely nothing to do with. And when Michigan, the University of Michigan, that is, inaugurated its DEI program, it intentionally placed itself in the vanguard of a revolution that reshaped America's higher education. This is around the country. College administrators were rapidly expanding DEI, convinced that such programs would help attract and retain a more diverse array of students and faculty. Well, today, that revolution is under withering attack, energized by backlash to the Black Lives Matter movement and the right-wing campaign against critical race theory in public institutions. At least a dozen states have banned or limited DEI programs at public universities. And a team of federal prosecutors led by Special Counsel Jack Smith said today in a filing that Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump bears responsibility for the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. In a filing responding to Trump's attempt to dismiss the case, Smith's team said it is incorrect for Trump's team to assert that the superseding indictment returned against Trump in August does not show that Trump bears responsibility for the events of January 6th. And the Nebraska Supreme Court ruled today that convicted felons who serve their sentences are allowed to vote. Now, this is after the state's top election officials sought to keep them from casting ballots ahead of the November 5th election. Nebraska has historically restored the voting rights of former felons 2 years after they completed the terms of their sentences. Earlier this year, state legislators voted on a bipartisan basis to eliminate the 2-year waiting period. But Nebraska Attorney General Mike Hilgertz later argued that only the state's Board of Pardons could restore voting rights, and Nebraska Secretary of State ordered local registrars to stop letting all people with previous felony convictions vote. Thank goodness for the Nebraska Supreme Court and its ruling. Also, new fundraising reports detail just how much Democrats in competitive congressional races have benefited from a wave of cash that flooded their campaigns after Vice President Kamala Harris ascended to the top of the party's ticket, leaving Republicans scrambling to stretch their money in the election's final weeks. Democratic House Senate and Senate Democratic House and Senate candidates raised eye-popping sums from July through September. And this is according to new reports filed with the Federal Election Commissions. They didn't just outraise their GOP opponents, they swamped them. Okay. A federal judge overseeing the federal election interference case against Donald Trump has rejected the former president's claim that he was actually concerned about foreign influence and interference in the 2020 election rather than the false claims about domestic voter fraud he continuously repeated in the weeks before the January 6th attack. The judge said there's no reason to believe that Trump's purported worries about foreign interference in the 2020 election animated his concerns at the time. And Judge Chutkan went on to write the theories that Trump has advanced would be relevant to his criminal case. She says, do not withstand scrutiny. This is the news of the day, and this is Areva Martin in real time, and I'm your host, Areva Martin. This is your one-stop destination for today's trending news, expert analysis, and my unfiltered opinions. In this hour, I'm joined by Fatima Gilliam. She is the author of Race Rules, What Your Black Friend Won't Tell You. Fatima and I are going to hold it down in hour two. And in hour one, that is, and in hour two, we're going to go all in on the aggressive plan for economic empowerment for African American men unveiled by Vice President Kamala Harris on Monday. It's titled The Opportunity Agenda for Black Men. It is a 9-page document that details how the Democratic nominee will provide tools for Black men to build wealth, support their families, and lead their communities. The plan derived from Harris's experiences as she and her running mate Tim Walz campaigned across the country, listening to story after story after story from businessmen in cities including Atlanta and Detroit as they talked about their struggles to gain access to capital and to help other young Black men develop crafts so that they could increase their wages, find meaningful employment, and build intergenerational wealth. We're going to go all in on that plan, what Black men think about it, and what this may mean for Black men. Dr. Rob Biko Baker, former professor of African American Studies at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, is going to join us, as well as Andre Brock. He's associate professor of literature and media at the Georgia Institute of Technology. So make sure you stick around for hour two, particularly if you are a Black man or you know a Black man, because you want to make sure you have a thorough understanding of the opportunity agenda for Black men rolled out by VP Harris. All right, before I bring on my guest, here's what I'm thinking in real time. I want to just say I have been out today. I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm on stop number 2 of my Battleground State tour. I'm going to all 7 Battleground states. I'm talking to voters. I'm door knocking. I'm phone banking, and I'm holding live events. I was in Phoenix and Tempe, Arizona 2 days ago, where I got to meet voters and held a packed house event at African American owned restaurant called Lush in Tempe, convened community leaders in that city to talk about the issues that were going to be most important to Black voters and how we ensured a record voter turnout. Well, today I was out on the campaign trail in Las Vegas, knocking on doors, talking to voters. And tonight I will be hosting a live event at Masterpiece Barber School. It is a school owned by an African-American barber. It is an accredited school by the Commission of the Council on Occupational Education for the state of Nevada. The owner is Marcus Allen. He's going to be on a panel with me. He's an entrepreneur, very successful one, a local city council member, and a pastor. 3 Black men representing different demographics, different age groups, but all very concerned about the state of Black men across the state of Nevada, as well as across this country. So we're going to be in conversation with an audience of young Black men, barbers, training to be barbers, men who are doing their apprenticeships, who are going through this Masterpiece Barber School so that they can go out and become meaningfully employed as barbers. We talk a lot about Black men. They've been the subject of so much conversation over the last couple of weeks. And so for me, it only made sense on this leg of my tour to go where Black men are. And this school, probably 75-80% of its students are Black men, and they're young. A lot of them under 30 years old. So if you want to find out what Black men are thinking, how they feel about this economic plan rolled out by the vice president, what they're thinking about voting in this election with 21 days left, it just made sense to be at a barber school to talk to young men who are starting out in their careers. So if you're in the Las Vegas community tonight, stop by, join this conversation, hear what these Black men have to say, and be a part of this critical conversation I'm having all over the country as I go from battleground state to battleground state. All right, I want to give a shout out to those Georgia voters. I'm going to be in Georgia next Friday, October 25th. So I'm encouraged to see that more than 300 Georgians cast their ballot yesterday for the November election. Now, that was the first day of early voting in the state of Georgia, and 300,000 people meant that double the state's day one record. So that means the state's record was previously 150,000 voters, and yesterday that number doubled to 300,000. And there are no signs that the pace is slowing down today. Again, hundreds of thousands of people went and stood in line to cast their ballot. They said more than 88,000 votes have been cast. That's today, Wednesday, by 11:30 a.m. So who knows? They may surpass that 300,000 by the end of the day. A top elections official has posted that they will break half. They will break past the 500,000 votes cast today. So over 500,000 votes are expected to be cast today, and that's 10% of the turnout that they saw in 2020. So we're talking huge numbers of voters are turning out in Georgia to vote early. And they say a lot of it has to do with the partisan enthusiasm on both sides of the aisle. Those folks who are, excited to vote for Donald Trump, as well as those we know that are excited to vote for Kamala Harris. It tells us a lot about voters being engaged. It answers the question about voter apathy. Not to say that there aren't voters, and I've met some of them on the campaign stops, or on my, I shouldn't not campaign, but on my battleground election tour. I've met some voters who told me, go away from my door. Don't come near my door. I'm not voting, not interested in either of the candidates. So we know there's still some voter apathy out there, but this turnout in Georgia, these early numbers really are encouraging. And, some of the reasons people say, look, we want to avoid some of the hours-long lines that are expected to be on actual election day, November 5th. And also they want to take advantage of an opportunity to have their votes cast early. What I've been telling voters in both Arizona and Nevada, when you vote early and someone comes by your door, knocks on your door, and you tell them that you voted early, you get checked off a list. And Democrats, particularly, you won't get a bunch of mail. You won't get a bunch of door knocks. You won't get a bunch of phone calls, because all of these records now are electronic and they are synced up. And so when you say, yes, I voted, I put my ballot in the mail, then guess you won't be getting those, what might become kind of repetitive, and even I'll call them annoying. Some people find them annoying. I don't. I find, being able to talk to folks who are out there volunteering and doing what's necessary to make sure the vote is turned out in states, particularly battleground states. Those are our heroes. So we want to make sure that we're always supporting those folks. If people knock on your door, don't be rude. Just, give them 3 minutes of your time, 5 minutes of your time. Doesn't hurt to be polite, to say, thank you for the service that you're doing. Door knockers are typically not paid. We are volunteers. We go into rough communities. We go into hostile communities. So just remember to be kind to your poll worker, to be kind to your canvassers, be kind to those people that call you. They are only trying to help ensure that you are engaged in this election, that you are engaged in this process. All right. We are going to tackle today's breaking and trending news right here on KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward. Stay with us.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
Substance use disorder and addiction is so isolating. And so as a Black woman in recovery, hope must be loud. It grows louder when you ask for help and you're vulnerable. It is the thread that lets you know that no matter what happens, you will be okay.
When we learn the power of hope, recovery is possible. Find out how at startwithhope.com. Brought to you by the National Council for Mental Wellbeing, Shatterproof, and the Ad Council.
King C. Gillette knows you're dedicated to your barbershop routine. But what about after? What's your routine for facial care to avoid dry skin, itching, and beard rough? Well, the King C. Gillette Beard Oil is the perfect fit for making your beard feel as good as it looks. It softens your facial hair and moisturizes to help prevent itch due to dry skin. Get facial hair that feels as good as it looks. Just trim, wash, and soften. With King C. Gillette.
We're thrilled to announce that the Dear Future Wifey podcast is now available on the Urban One Podcast Network. This show, hosted by Latiris R. Whitfield, explores the journey of discovering and rediscovering love and relationships. With over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube, Dear Future Wifey has become a prototype for discussions about love and relationships. Learn how to rediscover love, heal, and have faith in relationships. Go to urbanonepodcast.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. The Autopsy Initiative provides a second autopsy free of charge for victims' families who have lost their loved ones due to a police-related death. The services offered through the initiative include the completion of a second autopsy, disclosure of preliminary findings, and a final autopsy report. A police-related death is when an individual is harmed by police officers using deadly force, which results in an individual's death. Police-related death includes in-custody deaths, including those that arise during contact with law enforcement officers during arrest, pursuit, booking, transport, or incarceration. The Autopsy Initiative has a team of board-certified pathologists on call. An autopsy request may be completed by anyone with a close relationship with the victim, which may include the victim's spouse, partner, relative, close friend, or lawyer. To request a free second autopsy for a victim of police violence, please visit knowyourrightscamp.com. That's knowyourrightscamp.com. Then click on Autopsy, then click on Request. At KBLA, we believe in justice for victims of police violence. We say their names, and we don't black down. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
We are back, and Fatima Gilliam is joining me in this hour. Dr. Omikango Dubingo was scheduled to be here, but he had a medical emergency, so we hope everything goes well with him and his family. But Fatima, a lot going on. We're 21 days away from this election. Some say it's the most consequential election of our lifetime. I'm out talking to voters in battleground states, and it's clear to me that this is going to be a nail biter. It's going to be a very close election. And it's interesting. Someone that's traveling with me told me, a friend asked her, how come this race is so tight? I get that question a lot. And people seem to, I think, underestimate white supremacy and how many people in this country are voting because they're trying to uphold white supremacy. And they see Donald Trump as the last, gatekeeper of that hierarchical structure in this country. And as much as I say that to people over and over again, I don't know if that's really resonating with people, because they start talking about Donald Trump's policies. And we know, particularly when you talk about certain segments of voters, particularly Latino voters or immigrant voters, LGBTQ voters, Donald Trump has been openly disdainful of those voters, yet many in those groups still support him.
I think at the end of the day, I think the reason why Donald Trump won back in 2016 is because of exactly what you're saying, which is the white supremacy racism issue in this country. And honestly, it's also why he's set up to potentially win, which goes to the Electoral College, right? The reason why Kamala is going to have to try so much harder, try to win so many more votes, because she'll probably win the popular vote, but it's going to be whether or not she wins the Electoral College. And that in and of itself is a system that was created to support the slave states in the South in the founding of our country. So I think the reason why it's close is because of the Electoral College. And I think it's also close because, to be frank, I think there are just a whole bunch of white people that cannot adapt. They do not have the coping skills to deal with the fact that this is an increasingly diversified nation. And so this is their last vestige. They will vote against their own economic best interest. They will vote against democracy just so that they can cling to the thought that white people are superior.
Yes, and again, Trump out on the campaign trail, using this very threatening rhetoric, calling Democrats the enemy from within, saying that there's going to be chaos on election day if he doesn't win, saying that if he does win, he's prepared to use the National Guard and his power of the presidency to crush those who disagree with him. But yet people just kind of dismiss those comments. Like I don't think people can wrap their brains around the fact of a president acting like a dictator, because we've never experienced anything like this. But Donald Trump keeps telling everyone who he is and what he's going to do. But yet nobody seems, I shouldn't say no one, obviously we are, but half of the country seems to dismiss it as if it's a joke, or it's just him being him, or there's no way that can happen. And that's troubling to me, because he keeps telling us, I mean, he's not hiding it. He's very clear about how he's going to, I won't even use the word government, how he's going to dictate and rule, probably is a better word than govern, if he is elected.
I mean, he has endlessly narrated exactly who he is, right? So when he was running the first time, he said he could literally shoot down Fifth Avenue and nothing would happen to him. And he has endless cases against him. He's convicted of 34 felonies and he's still going strong. He will say that he'll be a dictator. He will say to people that, we're going to make this and fix this so good that you won't have to vote again. Well, what does that mean? That means that democracy is going away. So you have people who are listening to what he says. Sometimes it's registering, sometimes it's not, but they have fully drank the Kool-Aid and they are fully on board. I mean, he just had that gathering the other day where somehow he got people just to sit there and watch him play DJ. I mean, if I had been there, I would have left. Like, why do I need somebody to point out to play some songs, which incidentally, some of the songs I thought were hilarious, because he's playing YMCA when the Republican Party is so anti-LGBTQ. Because nobody from the Village People wants him playing that song. And he's also starting to get cease and desist letters for using people's music that don't want him to use their music. So he's a problematic character, but somehow they keep just going along.
Yeah, you're right. He was at a town hall and they kept having these medical emergencies. People were passing out. So they had to keep stopping the town hall. And literally for like 30 minutes, as you said, he just sat there kind of rocking out to these songs. Well, you're right too. He's gotten so many cease and desist letters that there are very few artists that will allow their music to be played at any of his rallies. We've seen him, take liberties and have been called on the carpet for it, and have, had to stop using that, those songs and that music. And here we are, Fatima, in the midst of all of this case is playing out before Judge Chuck. And the case, not the 34 felonies around the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels, but this is the case where he literally incited a riot to storm the Capitol with the purposes of trying to subvert the election results of 2020. There are briefs being filed that lay out, that make it very clear that attack on our Capitol, that he was responsible for it. And the Judge Chuck, in rejecting any claims that his efforts were designed to, investigate foreign interference in our 2020 election. So we have this very well thought out legal argument with evidence, with receipts, saying this man tried to subvert the 2020 election. And again, people dismiss it. They say this is this fake news, that, the Justice Department is weaponized against him, that Jack Smith and Merrick Garland, have it out for him. They're totally dismissive of what we saw happen to our Capitol on January 6th.
I just have to say that I have so much respect for Judge Chutkan. She seems like one of the few in the DC area that seems to be wanting to uphold the rule of law, wanting to align with democracy. Whereas I can't make that same statement about 6 of the Supreme Court justices, who seem like they are willing to go along with anything that Donald Trump wants, which I find as an attorney not only dangerous, but so disappointing. Because when you're in law school, and you're an attorney, you're taught to respect the rule of law, democracy, the Constitution. So I'm happy that we have a stopgap measure in Judge Chutkan, who seems like she is going to apply the law fairly and appropriately, which is why she keeps allowing Jack Smith, the special counsel, to submit additional briefs and keeps greenlighting and not allowing the process to be held up, as opposed to the judge that's in Florida that seems that she, frankly, should never be on the bench.
Yes, another attempt to dismiss this case. I don't know. I bet Donald Trump has filed close to 10 motions to dismiss the case, coming up with different theories for each motion, repeating, I imagine, some theories over and over again. And with this judge, as you said, who is so courageous and willing to uphold the rule of law, keep, dismissing his dismissal motions and pushing back on what she knows, and we all know, to be lies. Somehow he now is he was worried, according to him in his most recent filing, about foreign interference in our elections for 2020, which is why he, incited a riot. I mean, there's no logic even to the argument. It's internally illogical and flawed on its face. And thank you, Judge Chutkan, for pushing back, because we know she has been, the subject of threats. When you push back on Donald Trump, he comes for you personally, and then his army of MAGA supporters do so as well. But she has just held firm in her convictions and her belief, and she has done her job as she has been tasked to do. When we come forward, we'll talk about the Nebraska Supreme Court pushing back. Donald Trump has been filing a lot of state court actions trying to, predetermine, I should say, the election and prevent the certification in some instances of the election results and preventing certain classes of people from voting. So far, he's not having very much luck, thankfully. When we come forward, we'll talk about what the Nebraska Supreme Court has said to Donald Trump and his supporters. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
More of Areva Martin in real time when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with 4 Things You Should Know from BIN News. The judge in the 1996 trial of Michael Jordan's father's killer is calling for the release of Daniel Green, citing new doubts about key forensic evidence. Judge Gregory Weeks says the case has haunted him for nearly 30 years, and a decision is expected within a month. With less than 3 weeks until Election Day, former President Trump taped a Fox News town hall in Georgia and will join a Univision event in Miami today. Vice President Harris will appear in an interview with Bret Baier and hold a campaign event in Pennsylvania. Over 90 people in North Carolina are still missing in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. State and federal officials gave an update on how communities are recovering from the storm that killed dozens in the western part of the state. State officials say insured losses from Hurricane Milton are approaching $2 billion. And Jimmy Carter, now 100 years old, has fulfilled his goal of voting in the 2024 election. His grandson previously stated Carter would support Kamala Harris. Early voting began in Georgia on Tuesday. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 at BINnews.com.
Over in Hollywood, expect a 35-minute traffic jam on the 101 South between Hollywood Boulevard and the 10 7th Street interchange. Compton has a stall blocking the left lane of the 91 East before Wilmington Avenue, with a backup coming from Main Street up to 15 minutes. There's also an accident on the right shoulder of the 91 East after Central Avenue, causing some heavy traffic flow. In West LA, traffic remains heavy now over an hour and a half on the 405 South between Wilshire Boulevard and Palo Verde Avenue. And in Mission Viejo, an accident's been cleared, with a backup running heavy from La Paz Road on the 5 North before Alicia Parkway.
Some people just know you could save money on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Those people are probably saving a carload of cash right now. So what are you waiting for? Check Allstate first for a quote today. You're in good hands with Allstate.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
It's been a good week for former Lakers star Michael Cooper. He was inducted into the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame on Sunday. In another tribute to Cooper, the Lakers are planning to retire his number 21 jersey. The ceremony is scheduled for January 13th at Crypto.com Arena during halftime of the Lakers game against the San Antonio Spurs. Cooper's jersey will be the 14th number retired by the Lakers franchise. 2 of those numbers belong to Kobe, number 8 and number 24. The other Lakers greats to have their numbers retired include Magic Johnson, Jerry West, James Worthy, Elgin Baylor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, George Mikan, Gail Goodrich, Jamal Wilkes, Wilt Chamberlain, Paul Gasol, and Shaquille O'Neal. The Magic City Classic, featuring Alabama State and Alabama A&M on October 26th in Birmingham, has been picked up by ESPNU. Last year's game between the two HBCUs drew a crowd of 69,210. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Tabitha Smiley's new book, The Covenant with Black America, 20 years later, is now on sale everywhere. This classic text shot to #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list almost 2 decades ago. If you have the original book, you will surely want to get this 20th anniversary edition with powerful new contributions from today's leading voices. This 20th anniversary edition presents a compelling blend of historical insights and contemporary urgency in this critical and unprecedented election year. Get your copy of The Covenant with Black America 20 years later today. Environmental justice is racial justice.
Environmental justice is social justice.
This is KBLA Talk 1580.
Have you heard of the 50-30-20 rule? This can help you spend and save your money wisely. So how does it work? Distribute your dollars into 3 buckets. 50% towards needs, 30% towards your wants, and 20% goes to savings. Use this tool to help your journey to financial success. Sponsored by JP Morgan Chase & Company.
That morning chill means truck season.
5 more minutes.
No snoozing. Do it all in a Chevy Colorado or Silverado, including the class-leading range of the Silverado EV.
Talking to me?
Work, play, hauling, off-roading, a Chevy truck can take it all.
Okay, I'm up.
It's Chevy Truck Season. Get 0% financing on all 2024 Silverado 1500 pickups when you finance with GM Financial. Chevrolet, together, let's drive.
0% APR for 36 months. Monthly payment is $27.78 for every $1,000 you finance. Example down payment 9.3%. Must finance with GM Financial. Some customers may not qualify. Not available at least in some of the offers. Take new retail delivery by 10/31/24.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. The Live Your Life organization mentors young women, helping them break negative mindsets and see beyond their surroundings. Through career exposure and hands-on training, they're encouraged to think big, stay focused, and make positive choices. Founded by Nikisha Mama Boo Smith, who transformed her life to become a community leader. Live Your Life is changing lives, but they need your help. They're raising funds to keep their new building open and expand their program. Your donations will support food, clothes, hygiene products, and holiday giveaways. Visit liveyourlife32.com. That's LIVEYOLIFE32.com to help today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Hey there, Los Angeles. This is James Lucky Jr., publisher and editor of Los Angeles News Observer. Are you hungry for news that matters to you in the African-American communities of Los Angeles? Well, buckle up, because we got the scoop you've been craving. Stay in the know and never miss a beat with our free weekly publications conveniently available near you. Or hop on the digital wave and become an exclusive subscriber at OGNSC.com. Don't forget to join the party on Instagram and Twitter at OGNSCINC for behind-the-scenes access and sizzling updates. No more FOMO. Let's stay informed, connected, and empowered together.
We're back, and Fatima Gilliam is joining us. She is an attorney. She's also an author of a very important book called Race Rules, What Your Black Friend Won't Tell You. And in hour 2, we're going to be talking to two African-American men about African-American men. Yes, it is the Economic Opportunity Program or plan, 9-page plan, announced by VP Kamala Harris, targeting specifically Black men. A lot of reactions to that program, as well as a lot of reactions to the intense focus on Black male voters. Fatima, I'm going to be talking to 2 men later in the show about Black men, but you and I talk about Black men. Get your perspective. What do you make of all of this attention on Black male voters? What we know is that Black men are the most loyal group of Democratic voters behind Black women. So Black women are at the top. 97% are likely to vote for Kamala Harris. Black men, number 2 in that ranking, at least 88%, if not more, are likely to vote for her. But yet there's this hypersensitive, hyper focus, I should call it, on Black men. And, this notion that somehow they're being peeled off by Donald Trump. He was at a campaign rally recently and he said, oh, Black men, Latino men, you're getting a bad deal by the Democrats. I heard another Black Republicans say that Black people are doing worse under the Democrats. All they're getting is high prices in gas and high prices in food and high housing prices, as if Black folks are, going to the grocery store and we're paying higher prices than white people and other people are paying for food. But just what do you make of this focus on Black men?
Well, I do think that the Democratic Party needs to do a better job to deliver for Black people, females and males. I think the Democratic Party does take the Black voters for granted. And this is why you're going to have some people who are dissatisfied with the Democratic Party. However, Black people are going to overwhelmingly vote for Kamala Harris, females and males. So when we talk about, and I see this endless barrage on TV and the media about the Black male voter, I think in some ways they're sort of like feeding a story that doesn't fully exist. I mean, there are some people who are going to vote for her. I mean, there are not going to vote for Kamala. And frankly, they're just voting against their best interest. However, who should the media be focused on is white people, right? Who are the ones that really need to vote for Kamala Harris, especially white women, right? Because overwhelmingly, white women voted for Donald Trump over Hillary Clinton. They voted for Donald Trump over Joe Biden. And so if we're talking about a group of people who are truly voting against their best interests, it's white women, right? Because we have this abortion issue. Apparently, Trump is the IVF, a founder of IVF or father of.
He'll probably say Melania used IVF to, birth or to,
Well, let's just, if anything, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out that he paid for some abortions in his day. Okay. Because he probably has some spare change children somewhere, but in terms of who should be the focus, I do think this is just a whole bunch of hype. The media just sort of like goes off with the train. They let it flow. They keep following it. They create these stories, right? It is a problem in search of, I don't know what kind of fake solution. They should be focusing on the fact that it is really white people that are voting for him. And then they need to start unpacking, why are white people voting for him?
Thank you so much for making that point. I had a white guy that I was canvassing with in Las Vegas yesterday ask me, like, Areva, is this really a story? Because historically, Black men are overwhelmingly Democratic voters. And his name is Eric. I said, Eric, it's not really a story. I said, you have to think about corporate media. They've got a job to do, and that's to make money for their shareholders. And they've got to keep eyes glued to their stations. So they've got to create stories. I said, yes, historically, 10 to 12% of Black people will vote for the Republican candidate. I said, when it's all said and done, I don't expect much to change in this election. And yes, you're right. Not enough focus on those white women that voted, as you accurately pointed out, overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in the last two election cycles, even though Donald Trump just, makes such disparaging remarks about women in the same way that he makes about African Americans, Latinos, and gay people. Donald Trump is not the president that is ever going to support or elevate white women, no more so than he would elevate or support, minorities. So where is all the focus on that? Where is the focus on, as you said, white women voting against their own interests, voting for a party that is, denying them the right to body autonomy, voting for a party that is openly hostile to women's rights, women's reproductive rights, women's health issues? I don't know how come that story hasn't become, the focus of so much media attention as is the focus of Black men. But I am encouraged by this. One of the things that I encountered today in knocking doors in Las Vegas, talking to undecided voters. I don't know if I even believed, Fatima, that there are undecided voters out there, but we did meet a lady today who said that she had been on vacation. She has a 9-year-old son, and she just literally had not been paying attention to the race. It had become so toxic. And she had her ballot and she was going to sit down. She said she didn't really know much about all the candidates. And I said, will you give me a couple minutes just to talk to you? And I asked her, did she have children? She told me she had a 9-year-old son. I says, can you imagine if you had complications with that pregnancy, and you weren't able to get some kind of medical care that you needed because of some, really strange law about abortions, because we know abortion care is also health care. And she said, yeah, that's a real issue for me. She said, I have sisters. And I said, okay, well, let me tell you what Kamala Harris is going to do if she's elected and we have a Democratic House and Senate. She's made a commitment to restore the rights for women that we were stripped of when the Republican-leaning Supreme Court, appointed by Donald Trump, overturned Roe v. Wade. And I saw her eyes light up. I saw her literally say, oh, okay. And I said, there are only two candidates really in this race, even though there's some, fringe third-party candidates. I said, one of the two are going to win. And there's only one that wants to restore women's rights to their own body autonomy, and that's Kamala Harris, not Donald Trump. I said, Donald Trump, put those guys and one woman on the Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade, and he's been behind the states that have been passing these really restrictive abortion laws. And that did get her attention. So I hope, now this woman was Asian, she wasn't white, but I do hope that white women are once and for all going to stand up and vote in their best interest and not follow their husbands, which we know some studies suggest that that's how they vote and have voted in past elections. We'll see. The jury's still out on that. I do want to move on, though, to this Nebraska Supreme Court. Voter suppression is real, Fatima. There are people, attorney generals, Republican attorney generals, election commissioners in red states that are purposely and intentionally trying to suppress the votes of lots of folks, not just Democrats, but independents as well, and those undecided voters. And voters like people who have been just as involved. When we come forward, we're going to talk about this Nebraska Supreme Court ruling and why it is so important. Stay with us, KBLA Talk 1580.
You're listening to Areva Martin in real time on KBLA Talk 1580.
As a rideshare driver, I love keeping my car smelling fresh and clean. So when I'm driving, I only trust new Febreze car vent clips, now with 3 times greater scent control, because it's that little touch that sets me apart. I can turn the intensity down for subtle freshness, or I can turn it up for when I want lots of scent. So whether it's set to low, medium, or high, with new Febreze car, I know my car's going to smell amazing, which keeps my driver rating right where it belongs.
Picking up, Oscar! Sometimes I struggle to get to sleep. My body stopped for the day, but my mind is still running. So I take ZzzQuil.
ZzzQuil, the world's #1 sleep aid brand, has a range of non-habit-forming products to fit you and your family's needs. Invest in a great night's sleep for the best you tomorrow.
I'm awake and ready to take on anything.
Better days start with ZzzQuil nights. Explore our products at ZzzQuil.com. Use as directed. Keep out of reach of children.
From the first day of kindergarten through the day they graduate high school, in California, 38% of students attend a public school that fails to meet minimum health standards. That's why we need Prop 2. Voting yes on Prop 2 will fund urgent repairs at local schools, protect kids from toxic mold, asbestos, and lead, ensure clean drinking water, and repair leaky ceilings and storm damage. Yes on Prop 2. To fix what's actually broken. All funds go to local schools without raising taxes. You heard that right. So join the California NAACP, nurses and teachers, and vote yes on 2. Because all our kids deserve a safe place to learn. Ad paid for by Yes on Prop 2, sponsored by Nonprofit Education, Labor, and Business Associations. Ad committee's top funders, California Building Industry Association, Coalition for Adequate School Housing, California Teachers Association.
KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Worried about eviction? You have rights, and Stay Housed LA can help. Stay Housed LA is a partnership between LA County, the City of Los Angeles, and local service providers. From Lancaster to Long Beach, we're here to help you with tenant education workshops, legal clinics, free legal services for eligible tenants, and online resources about tenant protection laws. Don't face eviction alone. Call our hotline at 1-888-694-0040. That's 1-888-694-0040. Or visit stayhousedla.org. Stay Housed LA, keeping Los Angeles residents in their homes. Stay Housed LA, your rights, your home, our community. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Fatima, in your book, Race Rules, What Your Black Friend Won't Tell You, you write about voter suppression. And that's exactly what we are seeing happening all over this country. Efforts are afoot in red states by, I should say, attorney generals as well as election czars or these election commissioners to suppress the vote. And Nebraska is a good example where you had an attorney general try to step in and say that those individuals who had been justice involved, convicted of felons who had served their time, who traditionally are able to vote in the state of Nevada after a 2-year waiting period, he made the argument that no, somehow they would not have their rights restored, but the Nebraska Supreme Court stepped in and ruled that convicted felons in that state who had served their sentences were allowed to vote. Talk to us about voter suppression and how big of an issue this is in general, and then in this election in particular.
Well, I mean, I think we're in a phase of Jim Crow 2.0. When people cannot win on the issues, when they feel that they're not going to get the votes that they need, then they start changing the rules. And by changing the rules, they try to do things like disenfranchise felons. They try to gerrymander. They try to make it more difficult to register to vote. They start eliminating how many ballot drop boxes there are in a particular area. And they will target low-income communities, minority communities when they start doing that kind of thing. And so we do have broad-scale voter disenfranchisement that's taking place that is targeting communities of color, young people, the elderly, and any kind of marginalized group that you can think about, right? So you have what happened in Nebraska. And I can tell you, I've spent years on and off volunteering for election protection. I remember one year when I was down in Florida trying to ensure people's right to vote. And there were plenty of people that came up in Florida that thought that they had the right to vote or thought they took the steps so that they could vote. But because they had convictions and felons, they were not on the list. And we're just seeing broad scale problems across the country. But some of this really has been going on for many years, right? In 2013, there was a Supreme Court case, Shelby v. Holder, that really came for the Voting Rights Act and came for the pre-clearance portion of the Voting Rights Act. And what that involved was for areas that had historical racial discrimination. They would have to get clearance from, the Department of Justice before they can go about changing the voting rules. And then you had the Supreme Court, which I've already said is problematic and that I have little respect for and faith in, said, oh, we've evolved. We don't really need these kinds of rules anymore. And so they've just chipped away from the Supreme Court level of the Voting Rights Act. And what happened immediately is you started seeing state after state, community after community, implementing procedures and changes in rules that have made it increasingly more difficult for people to vote. And that is because, like I said at the beginning, they're not going to be able to win on the issues. They're not going to be able to win as you have a diversifying nation. And so instead, they put barrier after barrier after barrier so that they can maintain white supremacy nationwide.
It's really scary. And I don't think people appreciate how much cheating we are going to see in this election. There are literally just earlier, Georgia election officials tried to pass some new law that said they didn't have to certify the election results. But you do see some of these state courts, even state courts in red states, stepping in, saying no, being the stopgap preventing these election officials, preventing these attorney generals from enacting these laws that would basically rig the election in Donald Trump's favor. And at the same time, you see that what's also scary is happening this time around. Many Republicans who are running for Congress in this election season are the same individuals that denied the outcome of the 2020 election, I should say. They are people who, like Donald Trump, refused to acknowledge and accept that he lost in 2020. They then went and primaried those, what I'll call more traditional Republicans who acknowledged that Trump lost. And because MAGA voters have become just, sycophants of Trump, many of them ousted more traditional Republican voters. Congress people. A lot of Republican Congress people left. They just quit. They said it wasn't worth it. And so we may send to Congress a whole, group of Republicans who are willing to deny the outcome of this election, as they have consistently denied the outcome of 2020.
There are a couple of things happening, right? That's a power grab. But so on the one hand, you have the voter suppression that we just talked about. And the other hand, you have people, the same people, trying to undermine the credibility of our elections and getting people to think that we have voter fraud, when statistically, people literally have a bigger chance of being struck by lightning than there being any voter fraud, because it just doesn't happen, right? So they're trying to do that so that when they lose, because they're afraid they're going to lose, because they don't have the issues on their side, and their stances are unpopular, from their stance on LGBT, Q issues, to voting rights, to, racial issues, to the abortion issue, all kinds of issues. They're just unpopular, right? And so if they can get people to start thinking that these elections are fraudulent, that they're not credible, right? That we have a voter credibility issue, then that empowers them to then say, you know what, we're not going to certify because it wasn't valid, when it was valid. And I also find it very curious. You can think about it this way too, right? So all of these people who are trying to say that, Trump is still supposed to be the president and that he won this past election. And if that were the case, he'd be living at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, where he should actually be living in Rikers Island right now. But that's a separate issue. But, what you'll have is you'll have people, take for example, somebody who may have voted for Marjorie Taylor Greene, but also thinks that Donald Trump was elected. For some reason, miraculously, on these same ballots, Marjorie Taylor Greene is supposed to be a valid vote, but somehow the singular line item for the president is problematic, right? They don't have a problem with their mayor. They don't have a problem with their governor. They don't have a problem with their member of Congress, maybe their city council person, all those other things that were on the ballot. But for some reason, the craziness just seemed to happen in that one little section of the ballot. And that fraudulent behavior seems to just be happening where there are people of color. Right? It's going to be Philadelphia. It's going to be Detroit. It's going to be Phoenix, Arizona. It's going to be where you find people of color. But for some reason, it's not going to be Iowa. It's not going to be Nebraska. It's not going to be, Montana. And so these are really just nefarious games at play to grab power and to wrangle power away from people of color. And that also means it's going to impact appropriations. That's going to happen for our tax dollars, right? So it's a power grab, and they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes.
No, you're so right. We didn't see any Republican congressmen or senators or down ballot Republicans saying, this election was so fraudulent that even my race, we can't trust the integrity of the votes and the voters who voted for me. It was only with respect to Donald Trump. And, no one in the Republican Party was suggesting that, all the votes be thrown out as it related to those down ballot candidates. And, Carrie Lake, talking about down ballot candidates, a extremist running in Arizona for Senate, ran for governor of Arizona, would not concede that she lost. But she's so something may be moving just slightly amongst MAGA voters, because Republican lawyers who were working to support candidates after the election so-called, reputable Republican lawyers have stepped away from the RNC. They've stepped away from the Republican Party in Arizona because they said Kari Lake had become so extreme. They did not want to be affiliated with her in the event she loses, which right now she's down by as many as 10 points in that U.S. Senate race in Arizona. They didn't want to have to defend her because they said her claims are so outlandish that they did not want to put their law license and their reputation at stake. So there are still some Republicans. Now, we see Trump is not having many problems finding lawyers that will make the most speculative and spurious arguments on his behalf in court. But in the case of Republican lawyers in Arizona, they said, nope, we are not going down with Kari Lake because she is too extreme and she's likely to lose not just the governor's race that she lost before, but if the polls are right, she is going to go down in smoke in this election to be U.S. Senate. And hopefully that'll be the end of her. Some of these people, you just hope, okay, when you lose, can you just go away?
I mean, they're just a ragtag crew. I mean, that's just the reality, right? It's a bunch that seems to get disbarred, that seems to promulgate lies and falsehoods. And Kari Lake is just an example of another problematic person in Trump's orbit.
Yeah, hopefully Kari Lake, Donald Trump, they all just go away. That is my hope. We'll see. Again, Fatima Gilliam, she's the author of Race Rules, What Your Black Friend Won't Tell You. Make sure you check out her book. And if you ever have an opportunity to see her in person, as she is on a book tour, make sure you go out and support her. Really important book. Thank you so much for joining me and holding it down in this hour. In hour two, we're going to be talking about that aggressive plan for economic empowerment for Black men. How did that plan land with Black men? Stay with KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward.